Welcome back. I've got Dr. Aleksandra Gajer on the line. Dr. Gajer, how are you?
Great. So happy to be here. How are you?
I'm well and really happy that you're on the show and you have a very important topic to share with our leaders that listen to the show and leaders of all walks of life. So, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and then we'll jump into the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm Dr. Aleksandra Gajer. I am a board certified physician. I started my career in emergency medicine, a very high burnout, high stress field, and I loved it. And I did a lot of the things that I really wanted to accomplish in life and got to intervene in people's lives in a way that really made a difference. But after 10 years in the ER, I started to experience burnout and health issues. And although I was really happy with where I was in my career, I found that my life outside of work wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be, and I didn't feel the way I wanted to feel. And I became really interested in creating this state of health. In medical school, I learned a lot about disease, and we live in a very disease focused medical model. And I became interested in how do we create this state of real health, the state where we feel vital, where we have energy, where we actually enjoy our experiences. And that led me to starting my practice where I help people, high performers mostly, really optimize their health and live in bodies that can carry them through whatever experiences they're really looking for in life.
The work you do is critically important and it's a focus on being well instead of the reactionary, okay, you're not well, let's get you to a point of being well, but they don't carry it forward. And it's you worked in the system, so you know what it's all about. And one of the things that jumped out at me when you said, 10 years working in the ER and you loved it, and but you still burned out. And a lot of people think that burnout is because you're in a job that you don't like, and that is often the case. But I've seen many times people that are in the world that they want to be in, the work, they love it, but they still burn out because they're not taking care of themselves while they're doing whatever they're doing they love. They kind of neglect it. And the neglect component of it is not just, the time you spent at the office or in the clinic or whatnot. It's what you're eating, what you're consuming, how you're taking care of yourself. There's so many different factors on there. And as one of the things you mentioned in the pre-show is, 10 years ago, and you mentioned this, that, if people were burned out, well, sorry, it sucks to be you. And I guess that's what you got to deal with. Where now, thanks to, great people like yourself, you're finding new ways to help people not only, recover from it, but also prevent it. So I'd love to hear about that.
Yes, I think it used to be very binary. You either had this career where you were fulfilled, you're meeting goals, but the cost of doing business was sometimes your health or your overall well-being. And I think a lot of people found themselves at the peak of their career and perhaps not experiencing the joys of meeting their goals and living in bodies that didn't seem to function like they used to. I talk to a lot of people who have worked very hard towards certain goals and they're there, but now they're afraid they're going to lose it. They don't feel as sharp. The energy is not there like they used to. So there's this whole science now of performance medicine, which is mostly what I do with my clients. And usually we start with a foundation. Everybody is very, very different, but I think that metabolic health is at the root of our health. Metabolic health is basically what happens to food after we put it in our mouth. It's a lot more than weight. It is basically a hormonal balance. It's how our mitochondria are working. And people are often scared to tackle this because they think they have to do something drastic or, start eating salads every day for every meal, where it's not that. But I think if we focus on the foundations of how our bodies are using food as fuel and make some small changes in the way we're fueling our bodies, it can make a huge difference. And usually, we focus a lot on food and movement, but then we look at other layers such as hormone health. And, our bodies are optimized to work at their best, usually till about age 40 to 45. Humans have been on Earth 200,000 years, and it's only been the last thousand really that we've lived past 45. Our life expectancy was to reproduce and die. And our bodies are very smart, and we have down-regulated a lot of hormones, also peptides, which are chemical messengers. They're just no longer functioning at their prime past 45. And now that is when we're in our prime. So I deal with this science of how do we get that body supported again? How do we get you to the place where your brain is working optimally, where you have the energy, where you're sleeping, where your athletic performance is on point? And and we're there. I work with 70, 80, 90-year-olds. I have a 90-year-old woman who goes to disco cruises 3 times a year, and she is dancing the entire time. And I think we're in a place that if you make an investment in your health, you can really feel your best at any age.
Yeah, it speaks volumes because you see people that are, in their 90s doing things like that. Then you see people in their mid 30s and they're like, yeah, you may not see 45 if you're going to keep at this pace. And it is amazing in a way if you think about it because, other than, 1,000 years ago, 45 was the punch out. But now, I know that it's like you get in the mid 40s, you're like, okay, I think I'm finally starting to figure this out. Okay,
Right.
now I'm geared up. Now I'm ready. I've survived the nuances and the idiotic 20s and the 30s. Okay, let's get some things going. Now it's like, all right, now I'm ready. I'm in the groove, and your body's going. No, no, we're not going to, unless really tune into it and start, doing the things to bring back those things that, we're set to turn off at 45. And I think that's where your research and the work you do is so critically important because if we think about, leaders of life, leaders of business, industry, all of that stuff, the majority of them are north of 45. So we want those people to be at their best. Why? Because they're leading big initiatives, big companies, governments, you name it. You want these people to be at their best so their cognitive skills are in tune and working well with everything else that's going on. Because if they're not healthy, then the decisions they make, the direction an organization may take could be the wrong one just because the leader isn't feeling well. I know it sounds very simplistic, but we've seen it time and time again.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, most of the signs of this happening, the start of burnout is often silent. And we talked about this where, especially if you love what you're doing, we take for granted that the body's always going to work the way it's working now. And um, especially when people are young in their 20s and 30s, it feels like I can pull all-nighters forever. And I think in a lot of industries, I know in medicine, we are trained to believe that we can overcome anything. We can work these 30-hour shifts. Um, we can get through a shift and not eat and not go to the bathroom, and we're expected to be superhuman in a lot of ways. And I think that a lot of and it's crazy because these are people in healthcare, but then it comes as a surprise that the body stops responding the way it used to. So I think being a little bit more mindful and even investing, I think the habits we have now are the investment in future decades. So I'm in my 40s, and I know that what I'm doing now is not only keeping me functioning the way I want to right now, but the way I'm going to be in my 50s and my 60s and beyond. And some of the things maybe don't feel like they're making a huge difference now, but it's a big investment on what will look like in the future.
Yeah, what you put in your mouth and what you consume today definitely is going to have impact in your tomorrows and your futures. And for me, I years ago I had a food intolerance test taken. I was curious. It's like, okay, I know and I knew of certain foods that quote unquote bothered me after I ate them. And the results came back and I looked at it and I laughed at a couple things. I knew of a potato allergy that I had. I knew that before, which I find ironic because I'm Irish descent and I'm allergic to
Mm.
potatoes. That's kind of a weird thing. But ironically, too, I also have an intolerance to eggs, which name of my company is Breakfast Leadership. My logo is an egg. I'm like, oh, that's ironic. It's like, okay, but I knew, I saw, there's certain foods and I looked at them like, oh yeah, when I eat those, and I just started just keeping track of just from a nutrition standpoint and eating. I'm like, okay, how do I feel afterwards? And when I eat those foods, I feel fine, because I'm eating foods that my body currently, without any, additional therapies or things like that, naturally process that. Now, I know, like especially, a lot of the work that you do is, you can help, especially with the hormones and other aspects of things that you can basically retrain your body to say, okay, there's going to be certain things that your body will actually process better than before because of everything else that's going on and how things interact. It's the science of a lot of things too. It's like, well, I eat this, yeah, but what else did you eat with it? Because sometimes those things can, it's like, drug interactions,
Mhm.
that. There's certain, it's like, yeah, this drug will do a great job of this, but if you take this, it'll either mute it or it'll reduce its effectiveness or it could be worse, it could cause all kinds of different problems. So I think we have to be more mindful on what we're eating and where we're eating as well, because sometimes, restaurants are doing what they're doing, and what you're eating is that and then some. And that's why I'm a big fan of preparing your own meals at home because you know what's going into it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes. So I think that the habit that probably moves the needle the most is eating whole foods, trying to eat foods that were either come from the earth or come from animal products. And unfortunately, there's a lot of meat now that is treated with antibiotics and hormones and trying to avoid those things because that does make a difference. And again, most of human history, we've eaten real foods that come from the earth. And just over the last 100 years, food science has come up with all these chemicals that are passed off as food. And that has really changed the way our hormones work. So there was a study recently that showed that now the average testosterone of a 40-year-old man is that what it was of a 70-year-old man 30 years ago. So on average, 40-year-olds are walking around with a testosterone level of their grandfathers or their fathers. And that's striking. And I think that speaks to the chemical environment in which we live and convenience foods. Convenience foods will always be easier and more palatable and more tasty than sitting at home and peeling potatoes. But I think that there is a way to have a busy lifestyle and to try to choose whole foods when possible and avoiding foods that are laden with chemicals that have ingredient lists that are 100 names long. And that really goes a long way. It's very hard to overeat whole foods. It's, easy to sit down with a bag of chips and eat the whole bag, but if somebody put 5 apples in front of you, you're not going to eat 5 apples in a row. There's an internal stopgap that if you choose whole foods, if you choose to snack on almonds or a piece of fruit, you're not going to overeat that the way you would with a bag of chips, which is, the food science industry has followed a lot of what the cigarette industry has done. We've really hijacked that place in our brain that tells us we can't stop eating, and Doritos tells us that you can't have just one, and we think that's a good thing, but that's not a good thing. It hijacks your reward centers and you really can't have just one. And we're sort of in this epidemic where a lot of people are carrying extra weight, and that's highly inflammatory. That leads to brain fog, that leads to cognitive decline. We're actually treating cognitive decline in Alzheimer's more like type 3 diabetes now, where it's so highly related to what we eat, and especially the processed foods and the sugars.
Yeah, and I tell people, and I'm not the first one to say this, like when you go to the grocery store, try to stick to the perimeter. and not in the middle, because the middle tends to be the processed and refined and everything else. But even then, you have to know what you're buying. You have to look at it. You look at the ingredients, look what the meat say, and anything like that, because you can say, well, I'm eating right, but then it's like, well, what are you eating? And like, oh, wait a minute. It's like, yeah, you're getting this quote unquote lean cut of meat, but the ingredients indicate that it's been, added this, we put this in there and that to help you, is kind of the thing. It's like, if I eat the stuff, they're whole foods. I don't need that additional help because I'm getting those nutrients from the other places. And I agree with you. It's very convenient. We see it all the time. It's that, 5 minute thing. And even in healthcare, I know you saw it all the time, where people would, literally not take their lunch, or if they did, it was a real quick trip down to the little cafeteria that you have in the hospital. And, they came back with, a bag of chips and something else. And they basically inhale it like a puppy would new food. And next thing you know, they're lethargic for the rest of the day. They don't feel good, and they're hungry still. So makes them, that phrase we like to use, hangry, because they didn't get fed. They didn't eat food.
Hmm.
And it's take the time, because by doing that, you'll actually probably have a good chance of living a lot longer. And I agree with you on the type 3 diabetes concept. We're seeing Alzheimer's and dementia and all of those things, spiking, at record levels. And people are going, well, what's happening? Why is this happening? Well, it's what we've been eating. We Ozempic wouldn't exist if it wasn't for what everybody's eating. And it's, I don't get into debates about science and pharma or anything like that, because it's, just I have people and friends in the industry and all that stuff, so I kind of take a step away from it. But I wish we didn't have to medicate our bad habits. And I think that's a big part of it, is I think we're using, things like Ozempic, for example, is a get out of jail free card for many. And I know some people, they've got some situations where, yeah, they cannot lose the weight for whatever genetic reasoning. And okay, I'm not a doctor, nor do I play one. You are. So, but again, I look at it and going, you know what, you got to give yourself a fighting chance at first. And when you do that, you're going to feel better. And if you feel better, you're going to navigate through life better. You're going to lead better. Doesn't matter if you're the CEO of an organization or you're the CEO of your home. You're just going to be better by taking better care of yourself. And that's why I think the work, again, that you're doing is so critically important, because you're helping people kind of, I don't say necessarily reset, but reset so they can start feeling better. Because when they start feeling better, all those big issues they have in their life don't seem so big anymore.
That's so true. That's really the case. And I think we underestimate how far small habits can actually take us. And I think it's also never too late. I think there are some people who may be listening who think, well, I've been skipping lunch, or I've been eating a bag of chips for lunch for 20 years, and this is my life. I'm locked in here, and this is all my life will allow. I think we underestimate how much small changes can really make a difference, and that it's never too late. And there are, and I think all medications are tools. And if they're used appropriately at the right time for the right people with the right practitioner, then they can help steer the boat in another direction, especially if it's short term. And I work with a lot of people who are very, very busy, who aren't going to be able to set aside an hour for a morning routine or really plan the lunch. But there are still ways to invest in your health. And I often talk about how, rather than eating just to get through the day, let's think about it as a nutrient hunt. How can we get the most out of our food? How can we fuel the body, really fuel the body, get enough protein? Most of us are under eating protein. And the micronutrients that we get from fruits and vegetables are really important, especially for our gut microbiome. We have more bugs in our colon than we have cells in our entire body. This is an area that we're just really starting to understand now, but those bugs communicate to every other part of our body. They determine how focused we're going to be. They determine if we're going to have mood swings. They determine if we're going to be resilient to stress. And so it's not just eat your vegetables, it's feed these bugs because they are sending messages all the time to other parts of your body that determine how you're going to feel. And I think that some people are so used to the blood sugar roller coaster, the having a Snickers bar at 2 p.m., that they don't realize, I've seen people who think they're having panic attacks, but really they're just crashing off sugar. And when we work on stabilizing the blood sugar, then so many things go away. The brain fog can really improve and energy levels become more stable, and even that stress resilience comes up.
And that's the key. It's like if you can navigate through stress, then all the crazy things that happen in this world, and we know over the last 5 to 6 years, that's been nonstop crazy. It's going to help you just feel better and be better. And if you can feel better and be better, then what you can do with life, whether you're leading an organization or you want to launch a business or go out on your own or be a better parent or you name it, when you're feeling better, you are better. So it's critically important that you listen to what Dr. Geyer has said today. So I've loved this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and all the resources you have?
Yeah, so we are online at thegayapractice.com. That's our website. On there, there's a button to book a free intro call. That's the easiest way to just sort of find out how we work. We can work with people all across the country with health coaching as well as some medication support to kind of get you optimized and help you feel your best at any age.
I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So thank
Yeah,
you, doctor, for the work that you're doing and helping our colleagues get healthier. We all need all of us to be healthier because it'll make the world a much better place. So again, thank you so
absolutely.
much for being on the show.
Thank you.